Welcome to the Authentic Cinema Podcast. Today we will be talking about Carlos Reygadas' film JAPÓN. I'm joined as always by my co-host and good friend Bob Lyren. Bob, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm stoked to take an existential trip into the provinces of Mexico with you.
Into the rural provinces of Mexico. I am very excited to talk about this movie. I think you can sense that.
Yeah. Obviously, I want to talk about my impressions of the film, but before we do that, I was kind of curious why you picked this film, or why you wanted to watch it, or why you wanted to discuss it with me.
I saw this film, I think in 2022, the summer of 2022. My wife and my son were in France. They go to France every summer. I always have to wait a couple of weeks before I go, and I use that 2 weeks to really just like watch as many kind of more, let's just say, authentic films that I don't necessarily get to watch in my normal life.
Films that don't get to play in the family setting.
Yeah, exactly. And I could take a few more risks. Let's just put it that way. But it's really funny because I was sort of like, okay, I had like the Criterion channel at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm going to like swim around in Criterion. And I kind of, you have so many options, and I was a bit lost. And I just saw the cover of this one. And
the Criterion poster?
Yeah, the kind of new Criterion poster, which is this kind of really beautiful green, psychedelic. It looks like a hiker in silhouette in this psychedelic kind of green landscape. Cool. And then it said JAPÓN. And I'll be honest, I judged this book by the cover. I just like put it on. And it's another example of being completely caught off guard watching a film. I had a very kind of new experience when I watched it. I had never seen a film like this before, I think. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it on this podcast today, is because it is a wholly original film. And I think it's right in line with the sort of ideas we want to explore on this podcast.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is that when you pick the movie and you told me like, oh, I want to do this film for our next film, I had heard of the filmmaker, but I had never seen any of his films, and I'd heard of JAPÓN specifically, but I never watched it. And so my interest was piqued immediately. But you did me a solid, and I think because you had seen it obviously before I had, and you said, don't read anything about it. Don't look up anything. I'm not going to tell you anything. Just put the movie on and watch it. And so essentially I got to have the exact same experience that you did when you first watched it, which is like, just, I don't know anything about this movie. Like I'd heard things about it in the past, but I'd since forgotten them. I went into it just completely, raw, and didn't know anything. And thankfully luckily for me, also got to have the experience of having my mind sort of totally blown by this movie.
I do hope that people like are listening to this after they've seen it, and if you haven't watched this, like, this is the time now to pause this and just go watch it. And I do really recommend kind of having as naked an experience watching this film as possible, and you'll see what I mean by that. But this film, the first time I watched it, it really destabilized me. I'll be honest. I was just sort of like, whoa, like I was not ready for all the things that I'm going to experience. I just experienced. I wasn't ready for that. But it really also, like, it put a spell on me, this film. It's really, I think, one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. And I have to say that I've watched it now twice in preparation for today, and each experience has become more and more rich. And the primary reason I think I really wanted to talk about this is I think this film achieves something that is very rare in any art, which is I think it puts you into a direct experience with life and death. This film is all about removing sort of layers of culture, or the layers of technological culture. It confronts you with kind of a more direct experience with like the natural world, the natural cycles of life. And this film will make you see the world differently.
Yeah, I think that another interesting thing about it is that in particular, this film, and you can do this with other films too, but very much with this film, is it's not only a conversation about the film, it's also a conversation about the filmmaker, and also about the filmmaker's own ideas and his takes and philosophies on art how to and cinema, and they're all intertwined. And so when you talk about Japón, inevitably it's also going to be a conversation about the filmmaker. I mean, he's one of those filmmakers that when you watch an interview or listen to him discuss the film, it's almost as interesting as the film itself, because he's such an insightful and interesting guy. And like, it's just layers. He just adds, just listening to him talk is like adding layers of understanding to the film. And he's not trying to explain it. He's just talking about art, for example.
The most succinct way to sort of state his philosophy is, he said it in an interview we watched, which was, he said, it's all about presence in time. And I thought, yeah, that's true. That will explain everything that you need to know, kind of. So let me ask you, I mean, I have been dying to know, actually, because there is some imagery in this film that I think is really challenging, and I wasn't entirely sure how you were going to respond to this film. So I'm actually very curious, like, just your initial thoughts. How did this hit you?
It hit me hard, dude. It hit me hard. I think that when you watch a film like Japón or listen to Reygadas talk about cinema, for me, it has such a profound effect on me. I think that it's probably similar to other people who have religious experiences. Mm-hmm. Not to say that I'm in the church of cinema, but what I mean is that it's just this idea of like,
I love that idea.
When someone says things that just really resonate with you, like, for example, when Reygadas talks about Hone, he uses words like presence in time and intuition versus instinct. Yes. And cinemas, like, sort of, there's other filmmakers like Herzog or Tarkovsky or David Lynch, and they talk about cinema in a way, it makes my heart start beating a little bit faster. And I'm having a reaction listening to them talk about it. And so when you watch the movie, almost from the jump off, from like the very first shot of the film, I don't know why, I'm hoping that to gain some understanding, is like, you're just kind of like, whoa, okay, what's going on? Like, where am I right now? What am I watching? Yeah. There's meaning here. It's almost like, it's amazing to me how, like, just from the opening of the film, it might be, I hesitate to try to like pigeonhole it and explain it, but like, is it the pacing? Is it the camera work? Is it the color? Like, you're just really sort of caught off guard. And if you're of the mind of someone like you or me, you understand almost immediately that I'm watching something. There's something being translated to me. So I need to pay attention. Beyond that, I think that there's a lot going, not only is there a lot going on in the film, but like with landscapes, with sort of the human condition, with feelings, and trying to translate those things into film is just an amazing experience, I guess. And so when I watched the film, what were my takeaways? What was my experience, or what did I take away from watching it? I'm just like, it made my heart beat faster when I was watching it.
Yeah. I think I'll just lay out the basic plot, and it's not a complicated plot.
No, it's not. It's pretty simple.
It's about this. We'll just call him. The character literally does not have a name, but it's about this man. He's a painter from Mexico City who travels out into rural Mexico, into this beautiful sort of canyon valley. He's traveling out from the city into rural Mexico, into a very, very, very remote indigenous village, and he goes out to kill himself. He's going to go out. He's a painter, and I think he wants to have this like romantic suicide. He's not ready to just do it right away, so he needs to find some lodging, and it's such a remote village that it's not like there's a hotel. And he ends up having to board with this elderly widow in the village, and he sort of rediscovers a vitality for life. He ends up not killing himself, and it's just about their sort of experience, sort of briefly living together. He lives in her barn, and they form a friendship. And we find out that her nephew is going to come take the stones that hold up her barn away from her.
Right.
So there's that plot line, and then also from his sort of revitalization, he asks if he can have sex with her.
Right. Yeah, he wants to consummate their relationship.
Yeah, he ends up I don't know if falling in love is what we should call this or whatever. It's very ambiguous.
I don't think they fall in love. Yeah.
But it's very strange because it's this very old woman. He's no spring chicken either, but he's considerably younger than she is. And they have sex, and then the nephew comes and takes apart her building, and as they take the stones away on a train, there's an accident and she dies, and that's it.
Yeah, that's the action of the film, because basically that's just really a foundation for the process of experiencing what this main character is experiencing in the film. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea is like the plot is very simple.
Yeah.
But the film is not simple at all.
No.
And I think that, it's
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned, like, this is not a love story. This is not this idea
No.
that like this man is going to fall in love with this much older woman or something. No, it's not like that at all. His motivations are all internal.
Right.
He's going through, I don't know if it's fair to say that the main character is going through an existential crisis. That might be also something I read on like the Wikipedia entry or something, like he's going through an existential crisis.
It's pretty obvious that that's what's going on. And if
Yeah.
like let's do this. Let's talk about the two main characters. That's what I think we should do, because let's like just talk about who they are. And let's start with the painter. And we'll call him the painter. He's played by Alejandro Ferretti, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah, so he's a painter, and the woman is essentially just an elderly member of a provincial community living in this canyon. And when I say provincial, rural, like this is she doesn't have running water. Okay, there's no means of economic development. There's no business. Like it was funny when you said, because they mentioned in the movie, like, oh, he's like looking for a place to stay, and they're like, there's no hotel here, like there's no beds. I mean, there's nothing. It's just it's a group of people that are really kind of just surviving on this real small community.
This is part of the kind of where the world of the film, and what makes everything resonate with meaning in the film for me is actually that, and what I think the main character, who I want to kind of like dive in and look at him.
Sure.
He's trying to escape the city, like urban life. And he does have a conversation with Asen. That is the name of the elderly woman. She does have a name. Her name is Asen, which is for Ascension, which is funny because I was thinking about this, like the beginning of the film is the painter traveling out of the city and then down. He's descending, right? He descends down into this canyon, right? And then at the very bottom, at the very end of his journey down into the descent, he meets Asen. But what makes everything resonate with Asen and with what he, I think, connects into when he goes into the village is precisely what you're kind of alluding to, which is we're in this village that is completely removed from civilization. Asen even tells him when they're kind of negotiating his stay in her barn, like, I don't even have water. Like, water has to be brought up from the burrow. A donkey brings me my water every morning, right? And he says, well, I don't need water. I'm not going to stay here very long. That first negotiation with them is really interesting because they bring him to her. And she says to him, like, hey, look, I'm very old. I'm not going to be able to take care of you, right? And basically is what she said. I can't wait on you, And he says, I don't, and then he says to her, I don't need you to wait on me. Like, I don't need anything. I just need a place to stay. And she says, well, why don't you stay in the village? He's like, I don't want to be in the village. I like the fact that I'm out here and I'm completely cut off. I'm as far out as I can get, right? But it's really funny because they end up doing exactly the opposite of what they say, which is she says, oh, I can't wait on you. Well, what does she spend the whole film doing? She starts immediately waiting on him and taking care of him, kind of nurturing him back to life. And then he says in the beginning, like, I don't need anything. And in fact, he takes everything, And when I say he takes everything, like, it's not as simple as, oh, he's just exploiting her or like taking advantage of her. No. Not at all, right? He needs it. He needs to be nourished.
Well, he's in a moment of crisis. And so in that moment of crisis, he can continues his spiral. I mean, I think it's interesting to jump back to the beginning of the film really quickly, how casually he tells the hunter that gives him the ride halfway down the canyon. He's like, well, where are you going down there? He's like, I'm going to kill myself. the hunter's like, okay, so just hop in the truck.
All
I'll
right,
take you down there.
get
Okay.
in.
And it's like, it's very just kind of like matter of factly, but
Yeah,
but he's in clearly in a moment of personal crisis. And so to say
absolutely.
that he takes everything is, like you said, it's not like he's taking advantage. He's just in a moment of crisis. He doesn't have any other choice except to take what this woman offers him, whether it be like cold tea or a piece of fruit.
What I think is really going on with him is he's having some kind of like awakening, like his relationship with her, and then the world that she essentially gives him access to by allowing him to stay with her. He has this very direct experience now with nature itself, the naked reality of the world, which is what I think this film is kind of really about. It's like he wants to leave the city and he wants to go out as far as he can from urban technological culture, modernity, all the fantasy distractions, and he wants to kill himself in nature. But what happens when he goes out into a more natural environment is it reawakens his desire to live.
I mean, I think in terms of discussing the characters, I think one of the things I thought about when I was watching the movie, about when I was thinking about the painter, is I'm like, is he searching for enlightenment, or is he searching for closure? What's propelling him? And you brought up this point of like, him going back into nature, and the film and the filmmaker are very aware of that. And the way that nature and the landscapes are photographed is very much like a painter would view them, very slowly, methodically, looking out over the landscapes and letting sort of the landscapes come into you. The way that they're framed almost look like a painting, much in the same way that the painter would look at the landscapes. And I wondered how much of that is going into his journey, so to speak, from when he shows up in peak existential crisis and then the process that goes through it. And so I guess my question to throw it back at you is like, in discussing this character, what is he searching for something, and what is it?
I think he's searching for beauty. I think he's a painter. He's somebody who deals with aesthetics, and he wants to go have this beautiful death.
I think painters are professionals in their patience. They wait for moments to happen in front of them that they can capture with their painting. And so he's well versed in the act of watching and waiting and waiting for that moment. That's what painters do. So when you say he's looking for almost like a beautiful moment of reconciliation to kill himself, it rings true with who he is and where he is.
Yeah, he's almost like he's going to go paint his death, right? And he's looking for this beautiful death. And I like what you're saying about like painters will find the image sort of in the landscape.
In searching for this beautiful death and sort of putting himself in this environment, does he naturally start to awaken next to this provincial rural woman that is, for all intents and purposes, just like very kind of like of the earth, of the kind of environment. She doesn't have or want for anything in particular. Like, what does she do to him to make him sort of turn the corner, so to speak?
I was thinking about this last night, and I was like, there's this idea of purity in the film, right? She is this sort of pure spirit, right? This pure giving spirit. She's almost like a mother nature, right? She just gives and gives and gives and gives. And he frankly, like, he absorbs and takes and takes and takes. But what is happening is his soul, I think, is being purified. But purity not in the sense of cleaning, but purity as in something in its raw form. We just see life as it really is in this village. That's what this village does for him, for the painter. It allows him to see life as it actually is, unconcealed. There's this wonderful shot where he went out. It's the first time he goes out to paint, and he's sitting on a little road, and he's just sitting observing. And there's this train of school children that's like walking down the path, right? And you see all these like kids walking by, right? And they all just walk by, and all these little faces. And Reygadas takes the time to show us each kid as they go by. The last kids are like smoking cigarettes. Then the camera pans, and there's just a guy like working in a field right behind, right? And then it pans over again the other direction, and two like old people walk back in the other direction. And in that one single shot, you see the whole cycle of life, right? Like you see like youth, middle age in the field working, and then elderly, the end of life. It's all just there, and it's always there. When he first awakens, like he's been driven down into the canyons before he meets Asen, okay? But it's like he's staying in San Bartolo, which is the first village before he goes out to the really remote village. The hunters are taking him down the canyon road, right, at night, and then it goes black, and then you hear the most blood-curdling, disturbing scream, and it's like a pig.
Yeah, being slaughtered.
The way the sound is designed, I couldn't tell if it was something upstairs in my house or like if it was actually, it sounds sort of distant but close. And then he gets up and he walks out and you see this like, and it's like this white light, like the camera doesn't adjust to the lighting outside because you're going from dark to like, you know, you're inside and it's dark and then you're going outside into the light. So the camera has to like adjust its exposure. It doesn't really do that. It stays white. And then you just see this like blood, like splatter on the ground. Immediately he's descended into this canyon and he's already confronted with like the reality of death, right? And then he like walks in and there's like a butcher shop and there's all this meat just hanging exposed. You just see it. You see death in the modern world, in a city. These experiences are hidden from you. You don't encounter it. Now, all of a sudden, immediately upon his first night out in the valley, he sees death for what it is. And again, this is right before he's going to go do this to himself.
One of the things I thought when I was watching the film was I was like, wait a second, what year was this movie made?
Right.
Was this movie made in 1962 or 1982 or 2002 or 2022? In other words, the film is essentially timeless.
Yes.
There is no reference to time in this movie. It literally could have been made 50 years ago, or it could have been made last year, with the exception of like the headphones is the only thing in this movie that would give you any indication that this is a sort of contemporary setting. I mean, meaning 2002 when the film was made. Another thing that you just talked about, that scene when with the multiple pans that show sort of the evolution of life, it brings me to another thing that I thought about when I was watching this film, which was, how did he film this movie? Like, I was really sort of taken aback and just really shocked at like, as someone that's made films, you've made films, anyone that's tried to make a film, you know how difficult it is. And to make something so simplistic is often the most difficult thing. Like, I don't know how you film this movie, working with non-professional actors in a natural setting. And then like you sent me a video, or I found a video, he storyboarded this whole film. Like it's mind-blowing that he did that he had the pre-vision to be like, this is how the camera's going to pan. So back to your point, like there's a scene that sort of shows like the cycle of life in one continuous pan around a field. I'm like, yeah, he planned it that way. He had a vision. He is saying something. He is telling you about the cycle of life, despite how natural it looks and how authentic it looks. It's actually a statement by the filmmaker.
Because he also though talks about intuitive filmmaking. So like leaving space for the unexpected to happen. It is storyboarded, but I think there's also like he's not like Hitchcock. He's not just like, okay,
right.
I would go and wager that the school children walking by perhaps might have been he just captured it.
He says the more you plan, the more room you have to improvise, is something that he said. And I think that, you know, when you're shooting in a place like that, you presumably, he knows the area. He mentioned the filmmaker. We're talking about the filmmaker now, Reygadas. He mentioned that he grew up hunting there, that the hunter in the film is actually his father. It's safe to say he kind of knows the terrain, he knows the people, and he knows the culture. And he decided to use that as his backdrop for exploring these, I guess I'll call them philosophical ideas. Okay. So you talked about intuition, and that's a really important thing to him. And I think it's interesting that he chose a painter used as the main character, because, you know, it's intuition, not instinct. Okay. He talked about how like art is made through intuition. In other words, it's not an instinct. It's not a gut feeling. It's an intuition. It's an idea of where you want to go. But ultimately what happens is once you do it, the ideas and the meanings follow afterwards.
Yes.
So my question to you is, in this movie, like, was the painter, was he successful? Was like, not that he views it as success or failure, but in terms of like breaking down the story, like was he achieving what he wanted to achieve? Because did he really want to kill himself or did he not want to? And was this like was it working, I guess?
Right. That's a really good question. Like, did he actually want to kill himself? And I think
Right.
I think he had talked himself into it. I think he's scared to do it, though. I think he kind of delays it.
Like you said, he's searching for this beautiful death, and he has to find it first before he can do it. Right.
And I think what happens to him is he finds something even more beautiful, and it's Asen. You know, she is so pure. And when again, I would bring up this idea of purity, right? I'm not talking about like clean. I'm talking about like presence in time, a sense of presence, being there. And I think her presence, what it does is it reveals reality in its purity. He sees reality in its pure state. Let's talk about the suicide scene real quick, right? The quote unquote failed suicide scene.
Yeah.
He hikes up in the rain. Right. As he's climbing, he slips, he falls, he hits his face on a rock. There's a close up on the rock, just the rock. And you sense him, you hear him kind of stand up. And there's a little beetle crawling around, and a little drip of blood like lands next to the beetle and it's scurrying around, and then it starts raining. And I'm just like, holy shit. We should mention he's a cripple too. So this guy's like climbing up a mountain with a cane, and he gets to the top, and you see this just bloated dead horse. Its entrails are popping out. But again, he sees an image of death, right? Like it's right there. That's death, man. That's what death is. It's not a romantic thing. It's this grotesque.
That's what you're going to look like after you do this, right?
This beautiful horse is now this like bloated animal whose entrails are popping out of it.
Right.
Like he holds up the gun, and then we see him lie down next to the horse. And then it goes into this like aerial shot, and the aerial shots get farther away from him, and we see more and more of this just absolutely cosmic Mexican valley. It's so beautiful. It's one of the things I love about this film is the landscapes are just cosmic. But it goes all the way out. It goes farther and farther away. We see the whole valley. Like first you see him, and then it goes all the way out, and then it just goes white. And I to me it was an image of him like communing with nature.
Yeah, it was almost like he was simulating his own suicide to kind of like have the experience without actually doing it, laying next to this dead horse in the field. But I guess I wanted to jump back to, you know, his relationship with Asen and this pivotal moment in the film when they have sex. And it's really kind of an interesting thing because I guess I'm definitely interested to hear about how he got there, because I was thinking about it and I'm like, okay, two people having sex it can have a lot of different meanings. It can be like this ultimate expression of affection and love. It's the ultimate form of like human connection, like physical connection, spiritual connection, like making love, having intercourse. Okay. You can sort of assign all these kind of values to the act. And like one thing it's not in this case is not like this lustful exercise, you know, like this isn't, and that's why it's so fascinating, because she's an old woman and she's a beautiful old woman. She has this beautiful hair, but like, you know, she's probably like in her 80s or 90s. So I'm not trying to make it like, I'm not trying to be pragmatic here, but I guess what I'm saying is like, why did he go there? Was it this, like you said, was like, you're looking for this beautiful death. Did he essentially have an idea that like this was going to contribute to the process, like help him get closer to this place that he needs to be? Or had he already left it behind and now he was trying to be born again? Like what was it about this idea that he wanted to consummate this relationship? And I just want to say one more thing before you answer the question. It's it's almost like a funny scene. It's kind of, because like kind of like, I mean, it's weird. It's not weird. It's awkward. It's very awkward and funny, but that's very authentic and true. But like, why did he want to do it?
All of this connects thematically to me, like a dead horse, bloated entrails, also like a naked old woman. It's not like, think about the woman on the motorcycle in the newspaper, right? And then think about naked Asen. The woman in the newspaper, it's not real. This is real, right? Like naked Asen is reality. It's what is going to happen to all of us. We will decay. This is part of the natural progression and energy of life, right? Like that, and that I think is what he is that's what reawakens in him. He experiences this direct confrontation with life, with the actual real life. I think is it. He sees death for what it really is, what it really means. Like, he sees real death, not an idealized death that he wants to paint. He sees death, but he also sees life. So what is it why does he want to go make love, or why does he want to have sex? And I hesitate to say make love, because I'm not sure that that's what it is. Like, I think
have sex. Yeah.
Yeah. He tells her, when he proposes it to her, he says, I want to have intercourse with you. Like, it's not like I want to make love to you, Asen. I want to have intercourse. And I think what he's trying to do, honestly, is he's trying to plug himself in directly to that life force.
I think that you've probably tapped into something pretty profound there, and this idea that, you know, she is the provider and the giver, and he is the taker. And it's nothing malicious. Like, when you say he wants to kind of plug into, and I think it's not like he's not trying to take advantage of her. He's not trying to abuse this situation for his own benefit. I think that he's ultimately looking for a connection, and he's found it. And now he knows that, like, in order to sort of save himself in his own mind, he needs to make this sort of ultimate connection with Asen. And it tracks really well with me, because if you look at how the movie ends with her death. In other words, she kind of like provides the final act of giving is to give herself completely over to this guy, and gives him everything, and essentially saves him. And now her purpose is finished, and she dies.
Yeah.
And another thing that occurred to me while watching movies like this, one of the things I like so much about watching movies like this is it presents you with complex ideas, but if you're just a little bit introspective, you might come to have a moment of clarity where you realize that, like, whatever you're thinking about this movie is really a reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, how are you viewing what is going on, and what the motivations are, and what kind of questions you're posing? It's almost like you're holding a mirror. The movie's like holding a mirror up to you as the viewer. And so when I'm having thoughts, I'm like, oh, is this why he's doing that? And then I'm like, or maybe that's just what I think I would do, if the reason I would do that. And so I think that that's just another reason that the film kind of gives more.
Or I would say these films, you know, how are they making you look at your own life differently?
Right.
What questions are they going to make you ask about your life? It's not as much my life means this, so I'm going to assign it this meaning to this film. But what I'm more interested in, and what I love watching films like this, is that I go and have this experience with this film. That experience watching the film then informs my experience in life. It actually enriches my appreciation of life more, my own life, my own experience. It illuminates it.
In this podcast and in our personal relationship, you and I are exploring and chasing ideas and feelings through authentic films. We're trying to find experiences that motivate us, that challenge us through story, through thematic ideas, all different kinds of things. And the beauty is that the funny thing is that you and I are kind of stuck in this construct of, like, not only America, but like Hollywood and this like Hollywood system. But the idea is that out there in the world, in many different countries, there are filmmakers that are making films that are not a part of like this Hollywood construct, which is a totally separate thing, which I don't even want to talk about. But in places like Mexico or Japan or Korea or Germany or Italy or France, you know, they're not a part of this construct of like the Hollywood system, you know, that whole machine. And so what they're freed up to kind of make films. They're freed up to make films that are different in terms of like their execution and exploration as an art form and a form of entertainment and a form of like mental exercise.
They're not like corporate films, you know, like they're not films that have to answer to a board of directors at the end of the quarter. These are not profit-making ventures.
Right.
And this film is not it's not a blockbuster, you know?
No, it's not. That was never its intention. There are many well-known filmmakers that have sort of transcended like the their own countries or their own cultures and made films that have resonated with the larger culture, like guys like Tarkovsky or Sanjit Ray or Werner Herzog or even David Lynch, who's like an American guy, or Maike, exactly. And maybe Chloe Zhao will be one of those filmmakers. Okay, but I guess the idea is like, why those films? Why do you gravitate? Why are you and I searching those out? What do they really offer beyond what we've already said? And even this film, you can frame it in the framework of Japón.
Well, I think what you get from these films is and from Japón is you get a much richer experience. If you go see like a Marvel film, we're always ragging on Marvel films. The only reason I rag on them is because they are really factory produced. Like they are really just sort of like, they're like units that
Scorsese was right. They're just an amusement park, right?
It's kind of, yeah. I mean, and they have their own value or whatever, but they're not going to challenge you as much. You're not going to walk out of a Marvel movie and see the world differently, probably, like if you go to a Marvel movie, it's going to sort of reinforce like probably what you might already believe. Whereas if you go and see Japón, you're going to walk out and you're going to immediately see your entire experience is going to change. Like your experience can change. Okay. Like I'm not saying it will. For me though, this film has made me just see the world differently. A lot of what we experience in the film Japón is exactly that. It's an experience, right? So I think that if you go into a film like Japón and you try to just like understand it rationally, like, well, if you do that, you're going to cut yourself off from all the other ways you can understand it. Like, that's what's so interesting about the intercourse scene between Asen and the painter is that, if you think about it rationally, like you're going to be left short. You've got to understand that there is a poetic layer to it, an emotional layer to it. I would even say like a spiritual, mystical kind of layer to it. And all of those things are different things that are interwoven together. And so when you watch a film like Japón, or you watch a film like The Writer, or you watch a film like The Last Detail, you also need to remember you're going to listen to it with your mind, but you're also going to listen to it with your spirit, and you're going to listen to it with your heart. You're going to hear it experientially. One of the things that Reygadas talks a lot about in every single interview is how much he loves designing the sound design of a film, which he keeps saying, he's like, that's half of it. Like it's the sounds of the film. I wrote down the sounds. You hear wind, you hear the wind over the valley, the wind in the trees. You hear breathing, like you hear eating, the sounds of a man breathing as he's eating, like the screaming pig. We talked about that earlier. You hear the sounds of the different phases of the day. You hear what it sounds like in the morning light. You hear the afternoon sounds, and you hear night. Children laughing, right? Like, but really what you're hearing too in this film, and it's brought to you by sound, right? Is you're hearing a world outside of technology. And actually, it's loud. I think that speaks to what's that sense of reawakening. Again, he's connecting into that. But to our point earlier, what do we get when we see a film like this? You're being communicated to on all of these levels. Even the sound, it's so immersive. You're in it. He's taking you into this world. He talked also, which is really interesting. He's like, why does the camera linger? And because he said, I saw in an interview, he was like, because I wanted to express that the world keeps going, right? It's not just like a world that's been constructed just for this story. There is a world beyond all of this. And everywhere I point my camera, we're still in that world. And so why the camera would kind of pan away and linger over things is to show you that even after we see the action of this scene, there is actually a world that this is connected into, and it goes on everywhere. It's not just been made just for this story. It's all there. Films like this, they will challenge your own experience, and they will communicate to you on all of these different levels. And this is what is great about and unique about the cinematic art form is that it operates, yes, everybody always talks about it's a visual art form, of course, but it's also an art form that can communicate to you auditorily, so visually, auditorily, and also I think it's an art form that plays with time itself. No other art form, in my opinion, can really play with time the way that cinema does. Presence and time.
The whole point of films like this for me are that if you're inclined to be the kind of person that wants to watch a film like this, I think that the film is going to teach you as much about yourself as it is about grand or lofty ideas about philosophical thought. I think that, and the truth is that, when you try to watch these movies with someone that doesn't necessarily watch these kinds of films, I mean, talk about like getting plugged in or unplugged. You can't be someone like that watches the latest Marvel movie and be like, okay, let's watch JAPÓN now. Like, they're two totally different experiences. It's not necessarily made for your entertainment. It's made for if someone that wants to have an experience with themselves, okay? And that experience can be defined by each individual, which is why we tend to reject the critical analysis of a film like JAPÓN. Like Reygadas said, like the thing he hates about film criticism or people even analyzing his film is that, no, the analysis was for the artist. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets into some other things that we've talked about is like, no, it's up to each individual to come to a conclusion about what this film means and what it means to them. And I think the beauty of films like this and some of the other filmmakers we've mentioned is that this is really just almost like a mirror to you. You get to experience it the way you want to and come to your own conclusions about what you're seeing. And it might just be a reflection of yourself.
Yeah. The word for me is experience, not just consuming a film, having an experience with a film.
Well, I have to tell you, thanks for offering the film because you gave me a unique experience, man.
Well, it's funny, and I wanted to kind of say that what originally brought me into this film was like this kind of psychedelic artwork on the cover, right? And what is a psychedelic? Like when you take a psychedelic, you go and you have this experience, and it alters your perception, and you see the world differently. I think this is the value of psychedelics. Like it takes you out of your everyday perception, and I would say that this film is the most. It's funny because I wanted to watch it because of this psychedelic artwork, and I can tell you that I actually had a psychedelic experience watching it. And I really mean that when I say that. Yeah, and I would recommend like multiple viewings of it, but kind of like I would say like kind of like doing a psychedelic. Don't do it every day, Yeah. I'd like to just read a quote from Reygadas and then I'll shut up. He said, "A good spectator comes to the cinema to live, not to forget about life."
Beautiful, man. That's a great way to end it, dude. That's a great way to end it right there.
All right, guys. The film today is Carlos Reygadas' 2002 film, JAPÓN. Buy the ticket, take the ride.